Today I wanted to talk about my big stack of software engineering books, and specifically the top 5 books which have had a lasting impact on me as a software engineer. I did want to preface quickly though, I do have like some AI engineering books in this stack. None of them really went into technical details of how AI works, so I won't be including any of them in my list. So let's get straight into it. In number 5, we have Cracking the Coding Interview. Now, this is a really good book for anyone that's currently unemployed and looking for work. It has a bunch of practical exercises and advice in terms of like how to approach tackling the coding interview. And for me, it was a huge benefit because when I was looking to break into the full stack job market and get my first job as a full stack engineer, this book had a huge influence on like how I approached preparing for those interviews and doing, I guess, practical assessments to increase my skills. The reason, though, it is in number 5 is because I didn't actually finish reading this book or completing all the exercises, because I did actually crack the coding interview and get a job, right? The other reason would also be because some of the information might be out of date or out of touch, just because maybe the interview process today focuses more on AI skill sets, which would be more prevalent in the job market today, which maybe this book was written before that was really a thing, right? So who knows? I'm still kind of figuring that out myself, whether or not this book is as relevant as it was when it was initially written, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Not actually sure when this was authored though, but yeah. Should check it out. In number 4, we have Clean Code, written by none other than Uncle Bob himself, Robert Martin. So yeah, this book as well had a huge impact on, I guess, how I think about writing code. It changed the paradigm of like writing just things to work and getting the mechanics or subsystems to function as intended, as like however the spec intends them to be built, and kind of changed the way I think to want to write code that's scalable and that other individuals on the project that I'm working with have an easier time adopting, right? And understanding as well. It has an emphasis on writing smaller methods that are clear to understand, and also like making sure you're limiting dependencies and making your code able to scale with larger systems. And yeah, generally this book had a really big impact on the way I work. The reason it's not higher on the list is because I do believe Uncle Bob's purview on what clean code should be and like adherence to it is a bit of a maybe extremist perspective. I don't believe all of these rules in this book should actually be like listened to 100%, but I do think it's a good read, and I'd recommend any engineer to pick it up. Yeah, it definitely had a big impact on me. So number 3 for me has been this SQL All-in-One for Dummies book. Now, this one itself is a book that admittedly I haven't actually read cover to cover. It's kind of one of these books that I reach for whenever I'm looking for information or feel kind of out of touch or need a bit of a brush up on certain subsets of like databasing in SQL. Coming from a background in games, this has had a huge influence on me because, yeah, having 6 years outside of, I guess, full stack development, I need to kind of brush up on those skills a little bit more, and I feel like that's why this is in number 3 for me. A bit of a personal recommendation. I also did actually finish reading cover to cover the light version of this book, which admittedly is also one that I would probably just have sitting on my desk or tend to reach for a lot faster. It might not be as much of a valuable read for maybe other developers, just because, you know, a lot of this information does just exist in the docs or like online, so it's not necessarily something you need to purchase or have on your shelf. I just find it like super handy to have this just accessible for me personally. So yeah, I like it being number 3. It's had a big influence on the work I'm doing in full stack. So yeah. Number 2 is going to be another Uncle Bob book, and this one is called Clean Architecture. Now, this book is probably one of those books that's probably had one of the biggest long-term impacts on the way I build things and my approach to starting new projects and thinking about, I guess, structure, when trying to build a system that needs to be clean and scalable for like future use cases, or if I want to maybe migrate a feature or a subset of features to like a different structure, or add mechanics, or think about like designing something that other developers can use and extend. This book is, I guess, the foundation of that knowledge base for me. And having started reading it when I was still in the games industry, it actually had a huge impact on the way I think about writing code. Because in games, things move a lot faster, in my opinion, than like traditional full stack or more software engineering roles. And that's just because you have to kind of find the fun. So mechanics are always being added or manipulated or changed. And sometimes you end up in code bases that are kind of like spaghetti code. They just become a mess. So the paradigms that are encapsulated within this read have been super influential on how I think about structuring my code, so that I'm like limiting dependencies and decoupling systems and thinking about structure as like a layered, tiered system, so that I can architect my code to be able to manipulate it and scale it long term. So this book I would 100% recommend picking up if you're someone who likes to be kind of on the ground floor and architect the systems you're working in. 100% recommend picking it up, and it's had a huge influence on the way I work. Before we get into my number one pick, I'm going to mention a few honorable mentions, and those are these two books. So the first one I'll talk about quickly is Design Patterns. Now this one has, again, had a big influence on, I guess, how I build my systems and like the different design patterns I want to apply based on what problem I'm trying to solve. The thing about this read and why it's not actually on the top 5 is because a lot of this information does exist online. You can just look up design patterns, but at the time a lot of these techniques or tools, they weren't really part of my tool belt. So they were kind of unknown unknowns, something I talked about in my previous video. And just having had read this entire book cover to cover, I learned a lot. And I started using a lot of these tools and kind of added them to my tool belt. So very, very influential book for me. But yeah, a lot of this information you can just find online. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend buying the book, but if you do, it's a good read. Second book on the honorable mentions list is Designing Data-Intensive Applications. Now this, I think, is an industry standard staple. I haven't actually finished reading this, which is why it's not in my top 5 list. I think I'm about a third the way through, and so far I can say, yeah, the information has been incredibly valuable for me. A lot of learning, and I think I might actually substitute it with the sequel book if I had finished reading this one cover to cover, but who knows? We'll still see, pending completion. So in the number 1 spot, we have The Pragmatic Programmer. This book has been the most influential book that I've read in my programming career, and I've actually read it about 2.5 times. I often find myself going back to read specific chapters or insights, and the book itself isn't necessarily one topic. It's a holistic view of how you can be effective as an engineer and stay passionate and keep building like cool things. It actually comes also with a little cheat sheet, which I used to keep on my desk, which is kind of like a summary of each of the chapters they go through, and it just talks about like a lot of the different things you need to do to stay relevant as a software engineer. Concepts like dry, or making sure that your communication style is effective when talking to non-technical individuals. Just a lot of little tips to make sure that you're like doing a good job and staying relevant within this industry that moves so fast, right? And it is one of those books that gave me a lot of pride in my work. I think at the time I was going through a bit of a rut and didn't really know what I wanted to do for my career, and this kind of re-sparked my interest in software engineering as a field again. Sometimes as an engineer, you work hard and you get a bit of burnout. And this was just, very influential book for me. And I would recommend anyone to go ahead, pick it up, and read it cover to cover. It's also written by 2 people, which is cool. So that wraps up my top 5 list of software engineering books. If you have any suggestions for what I should read next, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear it. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.